Welcome to our webinar, The Native Language Tipping Point, Going from Endangered to Thriving. Today we have two ladies that have dedicated their lives to helping to revitalize their native languages in their communities. They are going to talk to you about their efforts and the kinds of things that they have done to revitalize their languages, and hopefully pass on some good information to you today. We are exceptionally blessed to have both these ladies. One of them is on the East Coast, so it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon for her, but our presenter from Guam, it is only 5 o'clock in the morning for her. So, and it's 5 o'clock Friday morning. So we are very happy that she has been able to join us from the far reaches of the Pacific. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We all know how hard it is to keep our language, native languages, alive, and how easy it is to lose our languages. I think you'll find that that the two stories you're going to hear today are quite inspiring. Both of the ladies that will be talking today have used Administration for Native American Language Preservation funds to further their language revitalization efforts within their communities. For those of you who aren't aware, ANA has a vision that Native communities are thriving, and they try to attain that vision by promoting self-sufficiency for Native American communities by providing discretionary grant funding for community-based projects, and also by providing training and technical assistance to eligible tribes and Native organizations. To learn more about ANA, the website is listed at the bottom of this slide, http://www.acf.hhs.gov/ANA. I am the Regional Director for the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center. We are a resource of the Administration for Native Americans. You see our logo and our website listed on this slide. We are hosting today's webinar. We'll go into webinars a little bit towards the end of the presentation, but ANA does sponsor webinars on a weekly basis on Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Today, Eastern is hosting. Next week, I believe we're taking we have a bye week because the panel review process is going to be starting. So the next webinar that will be taking place is going to be on the 24th, and I will go over that again at the end of the webinar. My name is Rondell Clay. I'm the Regional Director for the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center. I have been conducting training and technical assistance for ANA for the last 14 years. I am a member of the FINO-TA, and my background is primarily in education and early childhood. Our goal today is to explore the practices that have led to successful language revitalization efforts in two Native communities. We hope that you will come away with some ideas for successful practices to foster awareness and interest in the language, ideas on how to increase usage of the language throughout the community, and ideas for supporting continued growth of the language. And then finally, some different ways of sustaining your language revitalization efforts. So we're going to move on to our very first presenter. I'd like to introduce you to Jessie Baird. Jessie is the vice chairwoman of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. She is a linguist, a MacArthur Genius Fellow, community activist, and wife and mother, and how she has time to do everything that she does is way beyond me. She is definitely a superwoman. So I'm going to turn this over to Superwoman Jessie Baird. Jessie?
Hi, can you hear me, Rondell?
Certainly can.
Hi everybody. Uniki sak natatsuis Jessie Kwanikwais. Uniki kanakashkao nanats. Good day. My name's Jessie, and I'm happy to be here speaking with you. I'm going to talk a little bit about what our project's done. And as Rondell said, if anyone has any questions or anything else that the project may be able to help you with in your community, we would be happy to help. So we are the Wampanoag Nation. There are 4 communities left of the original 69 tribes in our nation, and we are the nation that was here when the Pilgrims landed in Plymouth Rock in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And our project, the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project, serves 4 communities: the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, of which I'm a citizen, the Aquinnah Wampanoag tribe, the Osanet Wampanoag Band, and the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe. And there are roughly 4,000 of us altogether, with separate governments and separate tribal roles, but right around 4,000, and everybody's still in southeastern Massachusetts and on their original homelands. Okay, so what was our language like, or what shape was it in when we started 21 years ago? We actually had absolutely no speakers of our language for 6 generations. But what we do have, we had at the time, still have, is the largest collection of native written documents spanning a time frame from the 1600s to the 1800s. And the language, Wampanoag, or Wampanoag, was the first American Indian language to use an alphabetic writing system. So missionaries came here, and they basically had 2 choices. They could either try to teach about 100,000 Indian people how to speak English and read English and then give them Bibles, or they could supervise the translation of those religious materials through native speakers that they could teach several English to. So it started a long tradition of literacy in the Wampanoag Nation. In fact, there were actually 2/3 more Wampanoag people literate in Wampanoag than English speakers that were literate in English at the time. One of the first, actually the first Bible put to press in the New World was printed in Wampanoag in 1663 in Cambridge, Mass. So that's the basis of our reclamation project. We use those documents, including the Bible, as well as sound change correspondence with other languages still spoken in the family, to know how the language should sound. And it's an Algonquian language in a family of roughly 40 other languages. And our language has 2 dialects, one for the mainland and one for the island. So what was the reclamation process like? Well, we formed a working committee in 1993, and it was comprised of people from all 4 communities. And one of the first things we did was just sort of put the word out there and say, hey, is this time for our language prophecy to be fulfilled, and who's interested? And a lot of people came together from all 4 communities. And we developed a working group. There are several things we had to do. First, to take a survey of what were the resources we had, both human resources and documentation, monetary, any partners we could develop outside of the community. And once we sort of had an idea of what we had to work with, we developed a standardized spelling system, and we had to send someone back to school. So we needed someone to become a linguist because a lot of the research was already done in the language by other scientists, and we didn't have money to pay someone to stay here for 30 or 40 years, so we decided we would have a homegrown linguist. So I went back to school and got training in the language and became credentialed. That's very important too. If you want to apply for funding, you typically need a principal informant or someone who has a credential in the field in which you're applying for funding. So having someone trained in your community is important. And for obvious reasons, language work is a lifetime's worth of work, so the chances of somebody staying right there are greater if they're from home, although you will need help likely from other linguists in your field too, and that's always great. But we developed a standardized spelling system, and we created curriculum. There was no curriculum, and we had camps and classes and full-time positions for a master apprentice program to produce fluent speakers. And right now we're preparing to open a state-chartered immersion school in 2015, and thanks in large part to ANA, we have over a dozen fluent speakers. So we did a master apprentice program, and once we had a really good core of fluent speakers, we moved on to start to develop our curriculum so that we could open an elementary school, K-2. And that's what we're working on right now, also thanks to ANA. So we'll be opening our school in 2015. So really, what have been the tipping points in our success? I think that there are probably 4 major things that I think are important to talk about. The first thing is that all of our planning has been community-led planning. We developed something called intertribal memorandums of understanding between the 4 communities right when we started, and those agreements talk about how we're going to proceed, how we're going to get to the end point. What is our goal? Is our goal to have everybody fluent? Is our goal to give people what they want? How do we keep moving forward if our tribal councils have political upheaval between the communities? Who chooses curriculum choice? How do we move forward in our strategic plan? All of these questions were answered by the community and people from all 4 communities. And we also made sure that we had a committee that was authorized by resolution or law from the 4 communities to function on behalf of all the constituents in the 4 communities. And the only thing you need to do to be on that committee is attend a class. And we meet every month, and all of the decisions are made by everybody all together. And they give the working team our marching orders, and we carry out what people are looking for. So community-led planning is vital. Also, as I said, solid, comprehensive language policies. Those are very, very important, and they are really the bones of your work. If you have a very good working team and your policies are loose or they're not politically sound and they don't protect the work, you are at risk. And of course, as I said, having a trained linguist, it sounds daunting, but it really isn't. Most places where people live, there is some sort of linguistic training or program in a local university, and it's really important to get people trained. It makes your life a whole lot easier. And I think that having someone in your community that's really culturally competent and that's going to be sensitive to what the community needs and how the community moves and works is important. The next thing is having people that are working on being immersed in the language and becoming fluent on a full-time basis is critical. I think that if languages are to be reclaimed or revived, we obviously need fluent speakers, And in order to have fluent speakers, people really need to focus the majority of their day on that. And in order to do that, they have to pay the bills and feed the family too. So it's important to have a program in place where people actually are making a career of language reclamation and making a way for those generations that are going to come after us. And it's such sacred work and hard work that I feel like we owe it to our sisters and brothers that are willing to step up to the plate, because it is a lifetime worth of work to make sure that they have what they need to take care of their families at the same time. And I think the other really important component for us has been the grant writer and the management team. So once a project is conceptualized, funding is needed, and it generally needs to come from many different sources. So we are extremely fortunate that we have a fantastic team of speakers who are also teachers in training that are going through their state certification to be licensed teachers in the state. We also have a interim director and personnel coordinator and grant writer. Those two ladies are just irreplaceable. Judy Urquhart is our grant writer, and Jennifer Weston is coordinating our charter. And these ladies' management skills are impeccable, and in order to move things along on a schedule that ours is rather aggressive, we need organization and determination and really a passion for language. So management of your team and grant writer has been really, I think, those four things have taken us from we have no speakers to we would like to start doing something to the reality of where we're at today. So, and where we're at today is really keeping people engaged, because from the beginning, from inception of the idea of welcoming language home to really having language be used as a principal means of communication, you have to have the community own it, build it, and then keep them engaged. So we've done a lot of different things to keep people engaged, and we've decided that we wouldn't have all fluent speakers or just simple phrases or just children or just elders. We've tried everything. We use everything. So one of the things that we do, and that's common now, all of the meetings that we have in our community, tribal council meetings, general body meetings, language meetings, various different committees, commissions, all of these sorts of groups start with prayer. So when we have a tribal council meeting, our language is brought into that tribal council meeting. Our court system has an opening that uses our language to open up court when court's held. Our monthly meetings are opened in our language. Our language classes are opened in our language, and they're opened in prayer. So we feel like that's important to keep us centered and remind us where we come from and why we're doing this and the sacred nature of what we're doing. We also hold immersion classes where we play various different games, and we're just using the language. We're not using any other language. We're just using Wampanoag Duong. We have had immersion dinners, and people are asking for that class again, and maybe this fall we'll do another one where people just get together once or twice a week, and they make a meal together, and we just use our language to do that. We also have workbook classes. Some people like to have a workbook. So we have workbooks that are from beginners to the most complicated parts of speech, and those classes will usually run from 6 to 10 weeks, depending on the type of class people are signing up for. We also have elders-only classes, and for a long time we thought, well, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. And this past year, we decided to just give it a try, and it's very successful. There are some elders that really just enjoy the quiet of having other elders in the room with them, or they want to talk about things that they all did together when they were children, and things are different now. So the elders-only classes are successful. And then the mommy, daddy, and baby classes all together, those are successful too, because there are families that have felt like if they bring the babies to class, maybe the babies are disruptive, or maybe they feel uncomfortable like they're disrupting the class, even if the other students don't mind. And it's a chance for the children to socialize together too in the language. So we have those. We have family immersion weekends. We typically have about 65 to 70 campers at those. And there's a picture there of one of our camps up on the screen. And so we spend 2.5 days going through all sorts of activities just in the language. We go to a secluded place. Once folks arrive, they stay at camp, and we stay in the language. And we have a system of paying wampum or demanding wampum payment if people use English. And on the last day, we have an auction in Wampanoag, we give away really great prizes, and that's a very successful camp. We fill up every year. And in the summertime, we have a 3-week summer and culture, language and culture camp for youth, and that's extremely successful. The children get to be together all day long, and they cover topics like kinship, clan system, planting, harvesting, their place in the circle, ceremony, the girls' roles, the boys' roles, and we do these things in the language so that kids are getting a really good sound cultural experience in the summer, as well as language. And last but not least, we try to make sure that we're very visible in our community and helpful in the community. So if other language, if other tribal departments are asking for language support, we help them with flyers. We help them, as I said, with the court. The court opens up in the language. Our ceremony is being incorporated into our treatment, our drug and alcohol treatment center that we're planning, and language is playing heavily in that arena, as well as our tribal health clinic, the IHS clinic, and the dental clinic. So those are some of the things that keep our community engaged, and I'm sure there are many other things other communities do and that we could do, but that's what we're doing. And lastly, what about sustainability? That's always a big question for everyone. How do we stay afloat? For a long time, many years, it was just volunteerism. And we did fine, but I think since funding has been in place, it's taken us exponentially further than we would have ever been. I think we got in 2 years where we may have gotten in another 10 years, just with funding in place and being able to have a full-time staff. So we submit anywhere between 5 and 10 applications for funding each year to various different places across the country. Everything from the tobacco companies to local funders to federal funders. We send out a lot of grants each year, and we probably get half of those maybe. And as I said, we have a very good grant writer. We really couldn't function without her. We also hold fundraisers throughout the year. We have raffles, and we have 50-50s and auctions at various times throughout the year, silent auctions. And we also have an Affinity credit card. If people don't know about that, Affinity cards are great. You can form a relationship with a credit card company, and they will put your logo on the front of the credit card. It's a regular credit card, and every time someone uses that credit card with your logo on the front, you get a percentage of the purchase. So you should check that out if you haven't tried it. We also appeal to folks to donate at our website, which they have done. And occasionally we get requests for language translation work from organizations that aren't tribal organizations. And once in a while we will ask for a language translation fee. and so we raised some funds that way. And a large amount of our funding right now comes from the tribal budget contributions. So if you really get your tribal community to fund your project, it's helpful, and it helps you to sustain yourself. And going forward, we are opening our elementary school, and because it's a charter school in the state of Massachusetts, the tuition for each child will come from the sending district. And that tuition we'll use to keep our school open and help our school grow. So that's where we are, and I hope I haven't bored anyone or put you to sleep, but that's what we're doing. And I would like to say too that we started with absolutely no speakers for 6 generations, and to be able to get up in the morning and go into my office as a vice chairwoman and hear people in that building greeting themselves, each other, in the language, and being able to hold conversations, fluent conversations, is such a blessing. And anything is possible with a good heart and a lot of hard work and prayer. And as I said, if the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project can help anybody, we're always really, really happy to help and honored to be asked. So, thank you, Rondell.
Thank you, Jessie. We're going to close out with a very brief video clip of some of the children that Jessie has worked with.
They're singing, these are the kids from our summer program last year, or year before last maybe, and they're singing a good morning song for the governor of the state of Massachusetts. So that's what it was anyway.
Well, at least we got the explanation. I'm sorry. I apologize to everybody. I'm not quite sure why the sound wasn't working. It was working just fine during practice this afternoon, but oh well. We will move on to our next rock star. Thank you again, Jessie. Our next rock star is Marie Arceo. She is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Harau, Inc. Like Jessie, she's a community activist. She's a wife and mother. And just the fact that she's on this webinar this morning just goes to show she doesn't sleep very much either. So I would like to turn this over to Marie.
Happy day in Milan, Sido, Story Company, Maniaco, Conahuzum. While si Marie Arceo, Hagi Guniloku, Yasugual, si Ray, na Manha Omami Nados. Good morning and half a day from Guam, everybody out there who are listening with us. It's a great honor and very humbling opportunity to be able to share our story from way over here in this tiny little island with the rest of the world. Jessie, meeting you and your project, over this webinar is very humbling. It makes me come to the realization that we're not alone here in this side of the world with what we're doing, which is a wonderful thing. At least we know there's people out there that we could reach out to, in this hard lifetime work of trying to achieve what is God-given to us as a people. And so to start our project, we actually started this venture of the immersion concept about 10 years ago. My husband and I founded the school, actually just started with a summer camp and after-school program, just to see how far we could get with that, knowing that for 30 years there have been efforts in trying to preserve our language. And so there have been programs before us that have tried and to include bilingual programs in the government public schools. That's the biggest program that we have on island. However, because there's so much politics and the amount of time that they're given, 20 minutes a day, is really not much of a program. I also taught in that same program, and so with the frustration of not being able to get any fluency, it was basically just, you know, memorization of vocabulary words and just really few phrases to get by, and then more focused on cultural activities. I decided to take a big leap of faith and invest my retirement in our program today. And I'm glad that my husband and I were guided by God to do this, because then we stand here today 10 years after, saying that now we have a chance after so many years that our language was at risk in a state of crisis for extinction. We could say that we were building a better chance for it to live now, learning immersion. And of course, we learned about this through the Hawaiians. Thank you very much. South Hawaii, those of you that are listening out there, you've given us a model that where we didn't need to reinvent the wheel. We just kind of went off of some of the programs, and we went to see while we visited Hawaii. And so here we are. Right now, the biggest benefits that ANA, the ANA grant that we applied for in the last 3 years, benefit us was to create language environments where families and people, you know, especially young adults who aren't speaking their language, now have the opportunity to continue and begin to speak. And just like Jessie, I was looking at a lot of the points, and just like other people trying to hold on to their language, I think along the way in our experiences, we kind of are guided by our Lord, and we come up with almost similar programs, although it's really healthy because we learn what others have tried, and, you know, we get to try it out. But basically, just creating those language environments and opportunities is what the ANA project led us to do, because the funding gave us an opportunity to hire on people, so there's more of us, you know, practicing the language. There's more practitioners, there's more teachers. And so that has really helped the language proficiency within the last 3 years. Although we've been founded for 10 years, it was just the last 3 years that we've really been grounded because of the ANA grant funding, thanks to ANA. Also, what we see happening and the impact from this grant is that a lot of increased self-esteem and, you know, our children losing their self-identity in a world that's not theirs. You know, that Western world influence on them is giving them back their self-identity, leading to, you know, better grades at school, the regular school. We're not a regular school yet, we're just an after-school program. So those are two main impacts that we've had on our language in the last 3 years, especially because of the ANA grant for our MANTIENI FINO-TA project. Move to the next slide. There we go. So some of the challenges that we've had from the past that we still continue to bear today is the negative impact from the last occupation on Guam while our elders were growing up. Those that are 50 and older who still speak the language, they kind of stopped speaking to the generations after them because they were punished for speaking tomorrow in school. And that was the American system. And so when they had their children, they decided that they didn't want their children to be punished too, so they stopped speaking altogether. So right now in our community, the most fluent speakers are 50 and above. And even though we're still blessed, though, because we're not at zero, you know, we still have those elders that are very fluent in the language, although our language is influenced by Spanish and the American language. We still have something to call our very own and make our own. So that's something we've made our own. The confusion between what is really theirs, you know, our children growing up in a Western society now very Western influenced society kind of influences their connection to our culture. And so it leads to, you know, a lack of self-identity. And so right now, our youth, our Chamorro youth are overrepresented in the youth correctional facilities, such as the Department of Chamorro Affairs and Sanctuary, you know, and Sanctuary is a runaway homeless shelter. And also the statistics from the juvenile drug court or children that are going through that program for rehabilitation, the number is just up in the 80 percentile. And so these are some of the things that we face today that we're trying to heal. And we find that having them feel a sense of belonging at the school in our program really, really improves their behaviors, improves their self-esteem in their families, in the community when they go back out. There's a big difference that we've seen between those children that attend our school on a regular basis and make it part of their lives. Their families have made a commitment to this mission. There's a big difference in the way they carry themselves as opposed to those that don't have any experience or aren't coming to our school. Some of the things we do in our project community marketing is we organize events that create these opportunities to show the progress of our school and our children and their fluency. You know, getting professionals involved, people, legislative people, even up to the governor involved in our project, so we have that kind of support in the community. Being the only stable immersion school we need all the support we could get, and we've built that reputation for the last 10 years now. We've also used social media such as Facebook and YouTube to get people's attention, even for Chamorros that are living abroad or off from Guam. And so, in fact, our participants or people that support us, our numbers are larger from the States than the numbers here on Guam. We also have a local language lesson program sponsored by one of our major television companies where we have a daily word of the day and a sentence that's played right after the news. And so that's a big hit, and that really helps to stir people up. And sometimes, we disagree about the standardization of our language, of course, and our growth. And so it's all good because we have them call in to say, oh, we've never heard it pronounced that way before, or we don't think it should be like that. And so it stirs up a good interest enough for people to have that reawakening to say, this is important and I'm going to pay attention. So we haven't quite lost it altogether, so that's a blessing. However, trying to restore it with our youth, because the elders don't really speak to the youth anymore in the language, is a challenge. And also just trying to have a standardization so that everybody uses the same system, the same writing system that we use today. Of course, using broadcast media, again, having commercials done, having our television show, and also we've gained, one of the ways that we want to put it out there is that we've gained an FCC licensing for a radio station, a major high-powered radio station, which we're fundraising for the present moment to buy equipment and get that up so we can have Chamorro programming on a regular basis 24/7, as opposed to having to pay somebody else or the other radio businesses here on Guam for any kind of programming or advertising. Now, if we have our own, we at least save money and then maybe raise some dollars as a nonprofit to keep that going and keep our programs going. And also the use of print media, of course, which we all know. The main methodology that we use, which is modeled off of the Anuenue and Punanaleo schools in Hawaii, these are the models that we've used or experienced, and we just brought it here, and then kind of tweaked it a little bit to work for us, where it works for us. So what we do is, so the kids don't just have regular language instruction from board, classroom, from off of the whiteboard or the blackboard. How we do it is we implement it with cultural practices. So if we're going to teach weaving, for example, the second agenda to weaving is to be able to teach the kids in our language and give them direction in weaving. And so it creates a lot of motivation. We do the same thing with dancing and also a lot of role playing, for example, in home environments and dialogues, like in the playground or when you get in a car at the grocery store and so on and so forth. These models of teaching the language help to keep the kids motivated so that it's not just the blackboard or the whiteboard to student in the classroom kind of learning. And the 90-10 immersion methodology has really, really worked. We do everyday rituals, prayer. We go through prayer with them. It's like being raised at grandma's house is what we call it. So parents drop their kids off to the school in our after-school program and in our summer programs. And so we treat them as though they're being raised at grandma's house, really instilling cultural practices also, our cultural beliefs, that we're losing actually through this Western kind of influence that we live upon today. In our teaching, we don't exactly teach by age, and I'm sure, Jessie, in your experiences, you all know this, and those of you that are involved in language, that we actually teach to the fluency level. So we could have a 5-year-old who's really fluent now and a 12-year-old in the same group, and the 5-year-old is actually more fluent than the 12-year-old, and so we teach to that rather than age, and the only difference would be in activity and their capability to execute the activities depending on their age. Also, we provide, we try to create language environments. Jessie has learned a lot from your program, which I took note of here. We've done just about everything that you have done in your language commitment. However, I think we're going to take you up on your language dinner, and the thought of an immersion weekend has started, but we haven't actually executed that, and I think it's about time we do that. And so we do just about everything. We have after-school classes, summer camp classes. We have adult learning, classes at lunchtime for those that are working in the vicinity of where our school is. They just kind of run over there and have our lunchtime classes. We also have evening classes, and these classes are more attended by young adults striving to regain their self-identity by learning their language. And so that's what that's catered to, because our school during our after-school program and summer programs are mostly for youth, because we know that's where the language will live. And so we have more of a focus on our youth programs than we do in our adult programs. We also do corporate classes where we have a teacher travel to corporations or agencies and departments in the government of Guam, both public and private, to execute lessons at their lunch hours, since everybody has to work to make a living and things are difficult now. The corporate classes work in that the corporation pays for the class, and it's really a nice investment for their employees in restoring identity at that level. And because we could afford it, that's another revenue stream that we actually use to sustain us. It's a really wonderful revenue stream because the corporation can afford to pay for those classes, and we go in and we have chamorros that aren't fluent in the language who are supposed to be mixed in with some of the other elders that still do it, and so we're able to connect the non-speakers to the speakers in that environment, and that works perfectly. And so between revenue funding and also accommodation and making it easier, more accessibility to the language, our busy days and busy lives, the corporate classes really work. We also partner with other schools where we have our teachers just go to the school and teach at that school using our curriculum. So we're not actually involved in the total school level at that point, but we do have our curriculum implemented within that school. We do have translation programs, so a lot of people are moving into wanting to have brochures for their workplaces, or because our language is a mandate or is by law an official language. Thank God for that. That helps to support that people have to have whatever they put out in both languages, in both Chamorro and English. So Chamorro and English are considered official languages on Guam, and that's a good thing. However, it still gives us a challenge of, that people speak more English than they have to in Chamorro. So we work with what could in that area as far as that is concerned. Again, back to how we sustain ourselves, it's really difficult after that wonderful ANA grant funding, because it's a big chunk really that we depend on, or we depended on. However, today what's sustaining us is our registration and tuition fees of the current students that continue to attend and the classes that we hold in all the different programs, from what I just mentioned earlier, for example, our corporate classes and our classes for adults. We also do just special events, cultural and language experiences. Some companies or firms and people in the community just want to pay for a day of that, and we go in and do that. We sell some books that we've made or some of our local artists and writers have produced, and so we sell that out of our office, either by consignment or those that belong to us that we've created. We're able to get some revenues from that. Of course, constant fundraising, applying for the many local grants that are available here on the island. We try to get in as much as we can. Coming up, we're going to go send in for the next AMA grant again, and we've spoke to our legislators, and this coming year we're going to actually have legislative allocations of money in 6 figures, so they promise. We hope that that's going to come through in the coming year to help sustain us, and so also other, philanthropists who are interested in our mission, who want to support us. And so those are some of the funding sources right now that we lean on to sustain us. However, I have to say that the funding source that really made the biggest impact, because it's such a big chunk, we're able to hire on more people since we need more speakers, we need more teachers, and so we're able to build capacity from that grant, and that's very, very important in trying to create the more, more and more language speaking environments. So that's where we're at so far. Still working hard, like you, Jessie. We continue to try to sustain our current programs without losing anything and just adding on more and more. And our biggest announcement and our biggest thing and focus right now also is that it's amazing how we are going to be submitting under Public Law 29-140 on the creation of charter schools. We're going to start off our Immersion Charter School. Our application is going to be submitted in August to open in school year 2015-2016. And what we plan to do with that is make it pre-K, 3, 4, and kindergarten when we first open, and then build a grade level each year after that, working all the way up to the 12th grade. This model is modeled off of the Punana and the Nui School models. The Nui School, I know, was a feeder to the Punana School, and so we're just trying to work that same model. So we're very excited about that, because that would, we're not just going to be an after-school program, but we'll actually have all subjects taught in Chamorro all through 4th or 5th grade, 100%. And then we start to break down, teaching them English after that. So that's the model we're following. We're, God willing, we're praying that we're able to open that charter school, because that's really what's going to sustain our language, I believe, aside from all the other little programs we've been able to establish so far.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna Marie. Appreciate your telling us all about your wonderful program. On the screen, we're moving into question and answers, and I have this, I don't know, a little diagram to help you learn how to get your questions in. For those of you who do not have a microphone or did not call in to the 800 number, you are going to need to type your questions into the question box and hit send, and I will read them aloud over the on the webinar and have our panelists respond to your questions. For those of you who do have a microphone hooked up to your computer or are on the telephone connection, there is a little button on the sidebar of your webinar control panel that you push, and it'll raise your hand. And if I see your hand raised, I will unmute you and you can ask your question. So, do we have any questions for the ladies? Okay, well, we are getting on to the top of the hour, to when we are supposed to close things off. Oops, in comes a question. Of course, that always happens, right, as I'm closing things down. I guess I'm just not patient enough. That's my problem. I'm just not patient enough. We have a question from Georgia Patricio. Anna Marie, how do you measure fluency levels?
We actually do pre and post tests with the children that attend, or even the students, the adults. So we have an assessment tool at the beginning that we measure their fluency. We use a 5 fluency level. There's 2 parts. One is a comprehension, and then one is a speaking fluency, or speaking measurement. So in the 5 levels, we determine where they're at in both parts, and then we work that through the lessons and then measure them again. We do it for the little ones. We do it on a quarterly basis because we have them almost every day. But for the adults, where we go 3 months on a 3-month cycle, we do it at the beginning, at the end of the cycle.
Okay, great. This question is actually, I think I'm going to have both you ladies respond to. It's from Andre Cramblett. And hi, Andre, long time no here. What are some funding sources that people do not think about?
As I said, can you hear me, Rondell?
Yes.
This is Jessie speaking. So some of the things people don't think about is asking your planning committee or your community members or board members to contribute. A lot of times people think, well, we're all pitching in here and we're doing our part. But really, if you ask the community to contribute directly, you'll be surprised that they will. Also, I think that people forget about things like an affinity credit card, contacting a national credit card company and saying, hey, we'd like to have an affinity card with our name on the front of it. And I think people also overlook small local funders. A lot of times language work is so intense and demanding as far as resources go. We're looking for large funders, and sometimes your local Rotary Club, your local religious institutions, would be willing to fund you, even for small things, and sometimes for small bits of larger projects. So think locally, too, when you're looking for funding, I say.
Great.
Okay, I'm going to tag on to Jessie and say, because my answer is going to be local also, you know, in a society where language and culture is thriving, and right now I think we're in a renaissance of our language and culture, we need to take that, be opportunists and take advantage of that, you know, it's not just out there. And so we who work in language to take advantage of our knowledge that, or use that as something to put into product and then sell. So like, you know, over the website, you know, e-books, creating our own books, and also even like cultural practices, you know, it's very rare out there that not just everybody knows how to weave, and so having apprenticeship programs in you know, what we do, which is becoming so rare, is twofold. You get to make some money and charge for your services, and also at the same time, we're advocating language and culture. So, you know, just taking what we know as linguists and activists in our language and culture and putting that into book form, or even holding little classes or having a program just in those areas of traditional art that's being lost is a way to get a revenue stream in, which is recently what we've been tapping into as part of our sustainability. I agree with Jessie. I think we're going to try the credit card infinity card, Jess. That's a really good one that we haven't tried before. We've tried tapping into Tomorrow Philanthropists, people that are just interested in our mission. They're retired people that, you know, want to make a difference before they leave this world, and so they're part of the best people to, you know, to ask. They're some of the best people to ask because they're, you know, they're already out from work, and they've got regular income still coming in, but they're still wanting to make a difference at the end of their lives, and so they're always willing to give, you know, they're small funders, but it keeps, you know, operations going, even simple things like paying for the printing, you know, our printing and our Xerox machine. So that goes a long way.
Great. Thanks, Anna Marie. I now have a question for Jessie from Elvira Sargent. How many years did it take to get from 0 speakers to where you are having conversations today?
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so probably 5 years ago. So from 1993 to 2009, 16 years. It took us 16 years to have a situation where we have a group of us sitting down in Starbucks in the morning carrying on a conversation about what's going on around us. And I think that it only took that amount of time because we just didn't have the funding to put the resources in place. I mean, I think the most time-consuming thing was getting someone trained in linguistics to start developing material, because you just have to put in the time and the education. But once that was finished, had we had funding to get a master apprentice team on right away, it would have made a huge difference. But you know, everything happens in the time that it's meant to happen, and certainly it took us a long time to lose all of our speakers, and it only took us 16 years to get speakers back once we decided to welcome language home. So, but it definitely wasn't overnight. But every little step counts, and I often wondered, when is it going to happen? And somehow having language again is like a well, sort of all of a sudden being full. You don't you don't notice the well filling up. But all of a sudden, there it is, it's full, and you don't know when was the point that it looked like there was enough water in the well, but all of a sudden there is, and I think it was just a little bit at a time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jessie. Okay, now here I have a question actually that both of you can chime in on. And we'll start with Jessie since you were just talking, and then we'll move on to Anna Marie. The question is from Ricardo Hernandez, and he says he has to deal with apathy in his community. How did you get the community excited about the classes?
I think, apathy is going to be a problem in any community because we have generational trauma that we're dealing with, and along with the generational trauma is shame, and a lot of times what looks like apathy is shame and fear. So we as Indigenous people sometimes look at ourselves and don't feel that we measure up in one way or another, and oftentimes that's culturally, people feel culturally incompetent, and I think that shame prevents them from trying or stepping up when they would otherwise want to. And I think the only way to deal with it is to constantly remind people that there are things that can always be taken away from us, things that have been taken away from us, such as our land, such as our language, such as our religious practices. All of these things can be appropriated and abused. But having something in your mind, if something's in your mind and in your soul, that's something that belongs specifically to you. And I think one of the tools that we used was exclusivity. The Language Project aims to serve Wampanoag people and their families, people in their households first. So we use those resources that we have to focus on the community. And I think people feel comforted and uplifted by that. When we have a mass of speakers, so that Wampanoag is a principal means of communication, then we can spend our resources on welcoming others to learn the language. But right now we're very focused on making sure that the resources we have are focused on the tribal citizens and their families. Their families aren't necessarily tribal citizens, but we're focusing on those families, and we're giving people a sense of having something that is completely and entirely Wampanoag, that is completely and entirely theirs. And I think that's very important. And we've also told people that if they just want to learn to introduce themselves and say good morning or good day, that's completely fine. There's no judgment, and we play a lot of games, and we always make sure there's lots of food around. People like to eat where I come from. So those are some of the things that I think we've done to fight the feelings of apathy. But they're always going to be there.
Thank you. Anna Marie?
So for us, basically, our people go through what Jessie was saying about, not feeling like we're good enough. They're afraid to speak. They're afraid to just come out because everybody wants to do it, but there's two factors. One is time, and, life just gets in the way. And so if they could speak English and get by life, then, learning tomorrow language becomes secondary. However, to push that up, to make it a priority, it's been a constant campaign. It's a constant campaign of, having to speak to people, go to events, meet with people, and, let them know what we have and what's going to happen if we lose it, because they're not thinking about this consciously every day, right, because they're too busy living and trying to make a living, working, trying to pay the bills. And so learning language doesn't actually come as a priority. However, for our school or for our mission, what we try to do is constant campaigning, and also having testimonials of people using media and having parents or even children, video footages, creating events where these speakers are actually there and having them speak in testimonial to what, progress we had is very, very uplifting for those that want to do it but have not even made the commitment. It's the best, for me, it's the best way. I don't even talk much anymore. I just take the children and the parents and I put them up there and I let them speak from their heart and their experiences of where they've come from, how they begun with nothing and now they're fluent in their families. Our family immersion program really, really work in doing that where, we have both parents also come in for those immersion classes to learn along with their children, and they're usually young parents. But we find that that's the best way, just using media, again, the Facebook and the YouTube, the television, that really, really helps to get us out there. In fact, sometimes, like my husband says, it blows us up even more than what we really are because media is so strong and so, but it gets the word out and it gets, it creates a reawakening for those people who are sleeping or tomorrow who are sleeping and, just taking the language for granted and making it pass us by, talking to grandparents especially so that they make sure that they pass down the language in their home environments because that's where it really is. That's really our campaign is that they come to school as a resource, but it really needs to start at home. And so getting those young adults and young parents to speak fluently is a challenge because we have the elders that know how to speak, but because of the mindset from past occupations, that's really settled in and they don't, really make the effort, and it's hard. You have to admit it's hard to pass it on when it takes work for the kids to understand, especially if it's a second language, when it really is supposed to be their first. So those are some concepts we've used that have really worked and brought us to where we're at today.
Thank you, Anna Marie. Just a couple more questions, and then we are going to wind up. I do appreciate those of you who have hung in there with us. We're about almost 15 minutes over time right now, but I just have a couple more questions. One is for Jessie. Jessie, how do you go about getting a MacArthur Genius Fellowship?
I have no idea. I think I asked them. I called them maybe 3 or 4 times the first week and said, "Are you sure you've got the right person here?" You don't. You get a call one day. It's a very strange process. Apparently, the MacArthur Foundation has folks that attend workshops and lectures and all sorts of things all over the place. And someone makes a nomination, and then the nomination committee begins to look at your work over a 3-year period, and you have no idea any of this is going on. And then they decide whether or not to make a recommendation for the MacArthur Award. It goes to a selection committee. None of these folks you're able to thank because you're not allowed to know anybody's name. And you just get a call out of the blue one day, and somebody tells you they're giving you a Genius Award. It's pretty bizarre. It's actually kind of scary. They know by the time they call you, they literally know where you were born, the hospital they know everything about you.
We sure MacArthur isn't working for the NSA?
Yeah, maybe. It's possible. But yeah, it's a very strange thing.
Okay, thank you, Jessie. And one last question for both of you. And Anna Marie, why don't we start with you? This is from Pamela Dallas. How do you encourage language use in the home by parents and grandparents?
The same way, again, it's a constant campaign, and it's usually just a testimonial to speak for itself, and then also the aura of our passion. If you're passionate about something, like Jessie said, you know, that it just goes right through. And there's really no, you know, specific way except that content campaign, putting it out there, holding events where we invite grandparents and parents to come, and we hold forums where they, you know, they have an opportunity, or we create an opportunity for them to listen in and maybe have that awakening of something that they take so much for granted. So it's really just, you know, we're a small community. We're on Guam. It's really small, so word of mouth, you know, and so it's out there. They know about it. They know what they need to do. It's just a matter of making the commitment. And so aside from all the great things that, you know, people hear, word of mouth, which is very, very, a very strong media for us here. Aside from that, it's really just now making the commitment, and that's where we're at in our community as far as languages. They know what they need to do. They just need to find that conviction of why and have that, you know, aha moment in their lives, and we just keep every day, you know, just constant passion and campaigning, talking to people, and then that kind of wears, you know, it shows and it wears on other people, and then they start to want to get involved, and then we keep getting bigger as we go through time. So there's nothing better than the constant passion. I think that's the key. Just always talking to people, always using, and of course media also, you know. But media can only go so far if you don't, you know, you can take the horse to water, but if they don't drink it, then that's where it ends. But having personal contact and constant, you know, encouragement, meeting with people personally at events, it takes a lot of time, you know, because you got to get out there. Aside from running the school, I have to get out there and make sure I go to these events where I speak to people and take opportunities of forums where I can be heard.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Anna Marie. And Jessie, would you like to share your thoughts on how to encourage parents and grandparents to use the language in the home?
Sure. It can be a challenge. I think the thing to do is decide that you're going to eat an elephant, and you're going to do it a bite at a time. And I would recommend, if you want to try this at home, everybody gets together and decides that this is what you're going to do, and you're only going to do it for a very defined time or amount of time when you start. So, for example, if you haven't done it or it's been a challenge, what you might want to do is say, okay, for the next 4 weeks, when we get up in the morning, we can only greet each other in the language, and we can't use any English until we're off the breakfast table, or until everyone's got their hair brushed, or until the bus comes. Or you can say, okay, if you're not a morning family, okay, so for the next 2 weeks, we are just going to use Wampanoag, or use your language, only once we sit down at the table to eat dinner, or once we start making dinner. We're only going to use our language, and we're going to use it through dinner. Or you can say, okay, we're going to have game night on Tuesdays and Thursday nights for 30 minutes for the next 4 weeks. And we can choose Uno, we can choose Go Fish, we can choose Chutes and Ladders, what have you. And we're only going to do it in our language, and put a sheet right next to the game board that has all of the vocabulary everybody's going to need to play the game. That's where I would start.
Well, that's perfect. And what a lovely way to wind up our webinar. I want to thank both of you ladies. The knowledge you have shared with us is invaluable. I think everyone who listened to your words of wisdom have some things to think about now. As I mentioned earlier in the webinar, ANA hosts weekly webinars on a variety of topics. It could be ACF initiatives, program success stories, or application development topics, or even grants management topics. Webinars are held Thursdays from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. The next webinar is going to be April 24th, and it is a program success stories type webinar that is going to be focused on water rights in honor of Earth Day. And if you would like to register for that event, the URL for registration is on the page here. Give it a couple days, though, because when I checked this morning, the actual link to the April 24th webinar was not posted yet. But if you go to the ANA website and click on the Events tab, there will be, that's where the link will be to register for the upcoming webinar. So, again, thank you very much. This recording is hopefully going to be posted on the ANA website in about 2 weeks. If you go into the ANA website and click on the Resources tab, and then in the search box type webinar and press enter, you'll get an entire listing of webinars that ANA has sponsored over the last year or so. Again, we appreciate you joining us and hope that you all have an absolutely wonderful afternoon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.